Are you deciding here in Week 8 who to start and sit at the quarterback position? Here's my picks. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Jake, Fantasy Headliners. Hopefully everybody's doing well out there here for Week 8 of the fantasy football season. And my schedule lightened up a little bit. I know I haven't had a chance to do some quarterback videos here the past couple weeks, but here we go, Week 8. Got all the matchups, all the quarterbacks, and my start-sit designation for each of them. Hopefully this can help you guys make some decisions. Once again, though, want to remind you, before I get into this list, have a live show coming Saturday night, 9:30 p.m. Eastern, this Saturday. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the notification bell. You don't want to miss it. We have a lot of fun on our live shows. I get to interact a lot with you guys. I answer questions, give some shout-outs, do some Let It Flow with the child-size helmet. All kinds of fun stuff coming up this Saturday night, 9:30 p.m. Eastern. Don't want to miss that. But now, let's talk some starts and sits here for Week 8 for the quarterback position. Thursday Night Football have the Miami Dolphins at the Houston Texans. And let's be realistic. The Miami Dolphins are starting Brock Osweiler. If it's Week 8 of your fantasy football season and you're sitting there and you're staring at your screen and debating on starting Brock Osweiler, I'm sorry, but your season is probably already over. I'm not starting him. I don't care what he's done the past 2 weeks. He's got a ton of banged up wide receivers, limited options, and yes, it's Brock Osweiler. He's a sit. For the Houston Texans, we have Deshaun Watson, who is kind of like a turnover machine here lately. He's struggled the past 2 weeks. Last week against Jacksonville, deservedly so. It's a tough defense there in Jacksonville. He only had 139 yards passing and 1 touchdown, but no turnovers. The week before that, against Buffalo at home, only threw for 177 yards, 1 touchdown, but had 3 turnovers. He's had at least 1 interception in every game this week, with the exception of last week against Jacksonville. He's struggled a little bit here as of late, and people are starting to get frustrated with him. His rushing ability hasn't really carried him like a lot of us thought it may at times. He's struggled, and he's got a tough matchup this week against the Miami Dolphins defense that's ranked 9th against opposing quarterbacks, giving up on average 19.7 points per game. Last week against the Detroit Lions, Matthew Stafford threw for 217 and 2 touchdowns, which is a decent game. Now, Will Fuller should be more into the mix in this game. Kiki QT is going to be out. That could, bump the volume a little bit here for Deshaun Watson. They had that huge connection earlier in the year and all last year. I look for that to slightly return this week, and I'm going to gamble and start Deshaun Watson. He's a low-end quarterback 1 at this point, but he does have such a high ceiling. I'm not going to sit him this week. Eagles and Jags are next. We'll start off with Carson Wentz there in the Philadelphia Eagles, and you're going to start Carson Wentz. Since he came back from his injury, he's had 3 of the 5 weeks throwing for over 300 yards, multiple touchdowns in all of those games, with the exception of his first game back against the Indianapolis Colts. Only 1 interception so far in the year, but does have 4 fumbles, which is slightly alarming. We expected a little bit better play out of that offensive line in Philadelphia, but they haven't really been able to get a run game going. If they could get the run game going, that's going to open up the field even more for Carson Wentz and allow him to be more productive. However, yes, he gets the Jacksonville Jaguars this week in Jacksonville, and they've kind of been embarrassed at times over the past few weeks there on defense. However, they're still the number 2 ranked defense against opposing quarterbacks, giving up only 16 points a game. Like I said, I'm going to start Carson Wentz, but I have limited expectations. I'm going to temper them a little bit. I'm not looking for the huge game from Carson Wentz. I'm just hoping he can get me to that 18 to 20 point mark and give me a nice solid start here in Week 8. For the Jags, we got Blake Bortles, and he is a definite must start for me. Ha, just kidding. Just seeing if you're paying attention. Please don't play Blake Bortles. Broncos and Chiefs are next, so we have Case Keenum of the Denver Broncos. Maybe you had Matt Ryan. Maybe you were using Dak Prescott or Phillip Rivers, whoever it may be. Maybe you just have somebody dealing with some injuries or somebody on a bye week and you need a streamer or somebody to fill in this week. I would start Case Keenum this week against the Kansas City Chiefs. Yes, he struggled last week against the Arizona Cardinals, only 161 passing yards and 1 touchdown, 1 interception. However, the 2 games before that, both were over 300 yards, including games against the Rams and the Jets, and had double-digit touchdowns in both games. He has a decent matchup against the Kansas City Chiefs defense, currently ranked 27th against opposing quarterbacks, giving up 28 points per game. And I've said it in every one of my videos. The Chiefs are going to score a lot of points, and Denver is going to have to throw to stay in this game. This Denver defense cannot contain teams like they used to. It's going to force Case Keenum to have to throw a lot this week, and I have him as a streaming start here for Week 8. For the Chiefs, you got Patrick Mahomes, and he is a 100% must start every single week. Currently my quarterback 1 in my rankings. Browns and Steelers are next, so we'll start off with Baker Mayfield and the Cleveland Browns. Now, Baker, despite having a lot of turnovers here as of late to start his career, he's got 7 through the first 5 games. He's been pretty productive throwing the ball. He's thrown for over 300 yards once already, and he hasn't thrown for anything less than 201 yards, which was his first game that he took over there for Tyrod, Week 3 against the Jets. He has a huge upside, and they're going to have to throw the ball against the Pittsburgh Steelers, whose secondary is giving up, yardage all year long. Right now, they're the 30th ranked team to opposing quarterbacks, giving up on average 31.5 points. I've already talked about Pittsburgh coming out hot out of the bye week, having a week to prep for this game, and really coming out and firing on all cylinders. That's going to lead Baker Mayfield to have to throw the ball a lot more. And right now, I'm comfortable with the start of Baker Mayfield here in Week 8. On the Steelers side of the football, you got Big Ben, and Big Ben at home is one of those guys that you just absolutely start. He plays much better at home than on the road. He's got a lot of offensive weapons at his disposal. James Conner, Juju Smith-Schuster, Antonio Brown, Vance McDonald always has that potential upside. He's got plenty of weapons in a game, like I said, they've had a week to plan for. They've already played the Browns once. They have some film on them. Ben Roethlisberger is going to be a definite must-start for me here in Week 8. He's somebody that could go out there and put up some big numbers for you here against the Cleveland Browns at home. Redskins and Giants are next. So for the Redskins, we have Alex Smith, and he's usually a really safe play, right? If you needed a bye week fill-in or you have somebody who's injured, he's typically somebody you can bring in off your bench and have a nice, solid game. The problem with Alex Smith is all of his pass-catching weapons outside of Jordan Reed are really hurt. He's got not a whole lot of options to throw it to, and it's really limiting his upside, and they're really leaning on the run game more and more with Adrian Peterson because of it, which really limits the upside that Alex Smith has, which is already limited to begin with. This week, Week 8, with all those injuries to all his wide receivers, I'm going to sit Alex Smith against the New York Giants. On the other side of the ball, you have Eli Manning for the New York Giants, and Eli gets a lot of hate. This offense isn't quite clicking. He did have almost 400 yards passing this past week against Atlanta, but only 1 touchdown. A lot of garbage time points, but garbage time points still, help your fantasy football team. Am I going to start Eli Manning this week, though, against the Washington Redskins? No, I'm not. That offense is still out of whack. I do like the weapons that he has at his disposal. He just can't seem to get things going. And I'm not going to sit here and try to talk you into starting Eli Manning, but he does have upside going forward. But right now, Week 8, that offense in shambles, I'm avoiding Eli Manning this week. Seahawks and Lions next, and we'll talk about the Seahawks and Russell Wilson first. Now, preseason, I loved Russell Wilson and his possibility for a huge season just due to the amount of garbage points and rushing numbers he could rack up throughout the season. And then he got off to a disappointing start, and a lot of people got frustrated with Russell Wilson. But this is where the turnaround begins, I believe, coming off the bye week. The 2 games prior to the bye week, he had 3 touchdowns in each game, scoring over 25 fantasy points. And I really like where this offense is going. Now that Doug Baldwin seems to come back to close to 100%, they've had a resemblance of a run game with Chris Carson and Mike Davis. I really like Russell Wilson. Now they are going up against the Detroit Lions defense, which is ranked 18th, so middle of the pack or so, around opposing quarterbacks, giving up around 22 points a game. But Russell Wilson, starting this week, goes back to must-start status, and I got him as a definite start here for Week 8. For the Lions, we have Matthew Stafford, and I expect the run game and Kerryon Johnson to start to limit the upside slightly of Matthew Stafford going forward. The more effective they can run the ball in Detroit, the less that puts on the arm of Matthew Stafford. Now, they have tons of great weapons there. They got Golden Tate, Marvin Jones, Kenny Galladay, now Kerryon Johnson in the backfield. They have weapons to use. He just may not have to go out there and throw it 40 or 50 times a game anymore to keep them in the game. This past week against Miami, you kind of saw that. He only threw for 217 yards, but had 2 touchdowns. The week before that, or their previous game before that, before the bye week against Green Bay, 183 yards and 2 touchdowns. Kind of bringing the numbers down a little bit. Still a solid start. And I'm going to have him as a start again this week. But the numbers that we're used to with Matthew Stafford, the 3s, the 4s, high touchdown games, those may be limited going forward. He's still a safe start here in Week 8. Going up against a solid defense, though, for Seattle. Right now, the number 2 ranked defense against opposing quarterbacks, giving up on average only 16 points a game. But like I said, Stafford has enough weapons to make him a solid start here again for Week 8. Bucs and Bengals are next, so we have Jameis Winston out there throwing the ball all over the place, a lot of the times to the other team. This past week, he threw for 365 yards, but had no touchdowns and 3 turnovers, including 2 interceptions. Had 2 interceptions the week before that. Had 2 interceptions the game before that. The guy throws a lot of interceptions. He's got 6 of them now through 3 games so far this year. But he throws enough, and his volume is high enough to be a safe start week in and week out. He has a decent matchup going up against the Cincinnati Bengals defense, which is 28th against opposing quarterbacks, giving up on average 30 points a game. Last week against Kansas City, they threw for 358 yards, 4 touchdowns, did Mahomes. They've given up passing touchdowns every single week to opposing quarterbacks, including more than 2 in every week except for Week 5 and Week 6. This defense can be thrown on easily. Jameis Winston relies heavily on the throwing part of the game. Not so much they're going to be running there in Tampa Bay. They're going to win or lose based off of the arm of Jameis Winston. Like I said, a solid start, but expect the turnovers. They're coming. In our latest installment of Thanks for Screwing Me Over in Week 7, let's talk about Andy Dalton now in the Cincinnati Bengals, who came out last week in a decent matchup against the Kansas City Chiefs, where a lot of us thought he was going to be able to throw the ball with ease, and if nothing else, get a lot of garbage points trying to chase and keep up with the Chiefs. What did Andy Dalton do? Went out there, 148 yards, a touchdown, and an interception, 9 fantasy points. Thanks, Andy Dalton, for nothing. However, this week the matchup gets even easier. He's got the worst-ranked defense as far as giving up points to opposing quarterbacks in the Tampa Bay Bucs. They give up, on average, almost 38 points a game. Andy Dalton, is he safe? Yes, I want to say that last week was a little bit of an outlier. By far his worst game of the season. Before that, the lowest point total he had in a week was 14, which is Week 5. Every other week he'd been 20 points or higher, and I expect to get him back to that level this week. If you need a streaming option or a safe start, I haven't given up completely on Andy Dalton yet. I'd start him against the Tampa Bay Bucs this week. Jets and Bears are next, and I fear for the life of Sam Darnold. He seems to be absolutely getting annihilated out there as of late, and now he gets the Chicago Bears. Starting to feel bad for this kid. Last week against the Vikings, threw for 206 yards and a touchdown, but also had 4 turnovers, including 3 interceptions. That's now interceptions in 3 straight games, and partially because he's running for his life back there. They're not giving him a whole lot of time to throw, and his weapons are diminishing on the outside. No more Terrell Pryor. No more Quincy Enunwa. Now he's left with Robbie Anderson, Jermaine Kearse, and Chris Herndon, who a lot of you guys have never even heard of. I fear for Sam Darnold this week against the Chicago Bears. The pass rush is legit. It's really hard to run against the Bears, but you can throw against them. The problem, not a whole lot of people to throw to there for the Jets. I'm going to sit Sam Darnold here in Week 8. On to the Bears now, and we got another hashtag to talk about. Mitch Magic, Mitch Trubisky, out there still killing it. I'm really happy to see it from this kid. I didn't like where they were headed in the preseason. I thought they were trying to limit him to being like more of a pocket passer, and that's not what he is. The past few games, mostly the last 3 games that they've played in general, they've really started to open the game plan up for Mitch Trubisky, and he's thriving because of it. Their last 3 games, he's thrown for over 300 yards in all of those games. 11 touchdowns to only 3 interceptions. And now last week, he turned into / running back, had 6 carries for 81 yards and a touchdown. If that can continue, his value will continue to skyrocket, and I'm going to ride Mitch Magic as long as I possibly can. Do I expect it to happen rest of season? There may be a few matchups in there that are a little bit tougher than the others, but as of right now, I have no issue starting Mitch Magic on a weekly basis. Now he gets the New York Jets, the 20th ranked defense against opposing quarterbacks, and they have given up multiple passing touchdowns to quarterbacks 4 weeks in a row. I'm starting Mitch Trubisky this week. I like where this offense is headed with him under center. Ravens and Panthers are next. So we'll start off with the Ravens and Joe Flacco. Now, there's a lot of decent options out there this week, for quarterbacks here in fantasy football. So I really don't expect you to have to rely on a Joe Flacco, but he's somebody who's been somewhat consistent this year. He's averaging right around 20 points per fantasy game, which is a solid day. And now he gets a decent matchup against the Carolina Panthers defense, which is ranked 22nd. They give up on average 23 points a game. So you have that safe floor from Joe Flacco, but there's so many other options out there with higher ceilings. I don't see you needing Joe Flacco. If he is your only option, he's a decent low-end start. But if you have better options, like I said, the ceiling is limited with Flacco, and I would look somewhere else. He's just not one of those guys that you're really excited about putting in your lineup. Cam Newton gets another tough matchup for the second week in a row. Last week against Philadelphia, had 269 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and no turnovers. And the one thing you're always going to get with Cam Newton is the rushing ability, right? Had another 49 yards rushing last week on 7 carries. But now he gets the Baltimore Ravens defense, which is number 1 against opposing quarterbacks, only giving up 15 points per game. This is a solid defense for the Baltimore Ravens, and I expect a lot more running in this game. The problem is Cam Newton's probably going to be doing a lot of that running, which doesn't limit his upside very much. If you have Cam Newton, regardless of the tough matchup, I'm going to start him this week against the Baltimore Ravens. Based off of his rushing upside alone, he should be able to get you that high floor, decent fantasy day regardless of who he's playing. Colts and Raiders are next, and we'll talk about Andrew Luck and the Indianapolis Colts first. And obviously, it's pretty clear that by now, Andrew Luck is close to 100%. He's coming off his third 4-touchdown game of the season so far. Last week against the Buffalo Bills, only had 156 passing yards, but had 4 touchdowns and no interceptions or fumbles. A great week for Andrew Luck, and he's been a solid play. He's now scored over 30 fantasy points for 4 weeks straight. So he's somebody that you can put in your lineup against an Oakland Raiders defense ranked 21st against opposing quarterbacks, giving up on average 22 points a game. T.Y. Hilton looks healthy. Marlon Mack back in the backfield, opening things up for him. I like Andrew Luck going forward, and he's definitely a start for me here in Week 8. On the Raiders side of the football, we have Derek Carr, who's going to be a sit for me here in Week 8. Yes, he loses Amari Cooper, but big deal. Amari Cooper really wasn't doing a whole lot there anyway. Do I expect a whole lot from Jordy Nelson and Martavis? I only know how to run go routes, Bryant. Not a whole lot. Maybe a little bit from Jalen Richard in the backfield and some Jared Cook at the tight end position. But other than that, I expect Carr to continue to struggle. He's only had multiple touchdowns once so far this year. That was week 4 against Cleveland. He's throwing interceptions in all but 2 games so far. He just has too much going against him. And with those limited weapons, I want no part of that Oakland Raiders offense there and Derek Carr this week. Niners and Cardinals are next, so we'll start off with C.J. Beathard of the San Francisco 49ers. And up until last week when he faced off against the Los Angeles Rams, he looked like a halfway decent NFL quarterback. He'd had over 20 points in 3 straight weeks, and he looked, serviceable. He looked decent. Does that mean that you're going to pick him up off of waivers and start him? Well, being the fact that he's only owned in 6% of leagues, I'm going to say no. He needs to remain on the waiver wire. I want no part of it. I really don't care. It's C.J. Beathard. There's better options out there, but I got to give him a little credit. He looked good 3 out of 4 weeks so far. For the Cardinals, you have Josh Rosen, and yes, he gets a new offensive coordinator now with Byron Leftwich, but he's dealing with a toe injury, and even though this offense is going to start turning in the right direction, we're not going to start Josh Rosen yet, obviously, but I do like the direction they're headed. You never know. He does have the talent, and maybe within the next 3, 4, 5 weeks, maybe down the stretch, if you need an injury replacement, he may be somebody who's serviceable at that time, but as of right now, here, Week 8, I'm sitting Josh Rosen, obviously. Packers and Rams are next, and I'm not going to waste time on this game. If you have Aaron Rodgers or Jared Goff, both are solid starts, both that I would have no issues throwing into my lineup here in Week 8. Saints and Vikings are no difference here with Drew Brees and Kirk Cousins. I expect a lot more throwing in this game. I outlined that kind of in my running back video. It's a lot more difficult to run on both of these teams than it is to throw on them. I expect a lot of passing, a lot of offense, a lot of Diggs, Thielen, Traquan Smith, and Michael Thomas this week. Could be a lot of offense. Both of these guys must starts 100% for me here in Week 8. Monday Night Football, you have the New England Patriots and the Buffalo Bills. Tom Brady, obvious must start going forward. He gets Gronk back this week. Yes, Tre'Davious White and that secondary in Buffalo is the best part of that team, but this is Tom Brady. It's the New England Patriots. I have no issues with them on national TV. Would not be surprised if they went out there, run up the score on Monday night, and he's a definite start for me here in Week 8. On the other side of the ball, Derek Anderson. He shouldn't even be owned, much less be thought of as a start. I don't care how deep your league is. I don't care how many quarterbacks you'd start. I'd rather start like Lamar Jackson than Derek Anderson at this point. Definite must sit. All right, there's all my quarterbacks here for Week 8 and all their associated matchups. Hopefully that was able to help you out a little bit and make those decisions here for this week. If you have other questions, ask them below. We have a community of almost 25,000 people now to help out, and I really appreciate your support. Make sure that bell is checked, the notifications are set to come to your phone, your laptop, whatever it is you have set up for Saturday night's live show, 9:30 p.m. Eastern. We're going to have some fun with it, and I look forward to talking to you guys then. Hopefully you have a good rest of your week, and we'll talk to you later. Thanks. Bye.